Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Victim Impact Statement of Charity Lee. A lot of what we have discussed these last 2 days has had to do with time and blame. How much time taken away from a life still being lived is enough to atone for a life taken? Who to blame for this horror? These are the central questions for the court. Since the time I need is short compared to the time my children face, eternity and 40 years, I beg the court to give me the time I need to say what I survived 5.5 years of a surreal nightmare to say. Because for me, the offender and the victim's mother, the central issue is what is the best way to make something good come of my children's lives, not the amount of time we measure out as punishment. I've been writing this statement in my head ever since the moment I learned the first love of my life murdered the second love of my life. I know what needs to be said. I just don't want to say it, much less believe it, but I have no choice but to do either. Just as you have little discretion in enforcing the laws of the state of Texas, I'm left 5.5 years after Paris murdered Ella, with little discretion but to follow the dictate of both my conscience and my heart, and speak the words I still have a hard time believing are about to come out of my mouth. I cannot sit up here and tell the court how my son's decision to murder Ella has made me suffer. Unless Paris proves otherwise to me, I believe one of the reasons he murdered Ella and decided not to murder me was to hand me a lifetime of suffering rather than 15 minutes of it. He has seen me suffer enough. Paris coldly and brutally took Ella's life from her. He took the people I love away from me. 2 years after Ella's murder, he conspired with my mother and they sued me, not once but 3 times on completely false and outlandish grounds, and he has frayed my mental health past the breaking point more than once. Yet I still did my best to be a good mom to him, and still he did everything he could after murdering Ella to make me suffer further. I refused to give him any more of my suffering. Your Honor, you have daughters. You've seen the pictures, heard the evidence. I leave you to imagine the emotional pain I live with on a daily basis. Then I ask you to multiply that by infinity, and then maybe, just maybe, you will have a small grasp on my pain. Here, in open court, I'm going to focus on only one effect Paris's crime has had on my life. Because Paris murdered his sister, I know my son better than most mothers will ever know their children. Because Paris chose to murder his sister, he exposed himself to me in a way most children never do. For reasons I only partially grasp, I understand my son. If I didn't, it would be easy to hate him for what he did to Ella. I know many moms who hate their children for much less than what my child has done. I wish I did not understand Paris. Understanding his mind is not a pleasant understanding to live with. Being his mother is not a pleasant experience to live with. I observed growing up that parenting did not seem to be a pleasant experience for many in my family, but I had higher hopes for my parenting. When Paris was born, I promised him 2 things. I would love him no matter what, and I would be the best mom I could be no matter what. I've never failed to keep the first promise. I know I've never once stopped loving my son. Once, in the 13 years I had him safe in my arms for 6 months in 2005, I failed to keep my second promise when I relapsed. Self-hatred for breaking that promise is my sentence to live with. While many don't, won't, or can't believe what I'm about to say, I say it to keep my second promise to Paris to be the best mom I can be no matter what. When you're the mother of a child you believe to be a psychopath, you have no idea how hard it is to know how to do that. I love my son, still want to be the best mom I can be in spite of the fact I know Paris can't love me, can't see the beautiful reality of what I've done by loving him, in spite of having every reason to hate him. The best Paris can feel about me is best summed up by his own words. I asked him once when he was 15 years old if he even loved me, cared if I stayed or went. His response? I love to hate you. I hate to love you. Not much has changed for either one of us. The best plan I've come up with since accepting he is different and dangerous is to love him, do what I can to keep him safe in the world he's chosen to live in, and unless he proves me wrong, warn the world he is dangerous so he can never do to someone else and himself what he did to our family that night. What I know about my son is this: he is sick. He could care less that he sexually assaulted and murdered Ella. He has a dark side that is dormant right now, but my son is dangerous. Under the right conditions, I truly believe he could kill again with as little compunction about it as he has for what he did to Ella. I know he will experience those conditions on a regular basis once he is sent to prison. I sincerely hope he does not have to kill again because Texas has no concern for human rights. I know my son is a sadist, a psychopath, and a narcissist. I know what sadists, psychopaths, and narcissists can grow up to do, especially growing up as Paris will have since the age of 13. We've already seen what Paris was capable of at the tender age of 13, after growing up in the home of a mother who loved him. Contrary to what my other so-called family members believe, I did not arrive at this conclusion on my own, and I did not arrive at this conclusion to absolve myself of all responsibility for Ella's death or to inflict some sort of twisted revenge on my son. I love my son, always have, always will, no matter what. Revenge has never crossed my mind. That is how my family thinks, not me. The first person ever to call Paris a monster was actually his grandmother. I was the one who refused to believe that. I still refuse to believe that, no matter how many people call him that or how many times I hear it. Paris is not a monster, he's a human being. I know, I gave birth to him. He has no tail, no horns. I was the first to suspect Paris was lying about what happened the night he murdered Ella. The first to know he killed her on purpose. When I confronted him about it, he laughed, told me I was stupid because all his life, I had always believed he was so smart, so amazing, so creative, so handsome. He was pleased, it seemed, with how well he had us all fooled. I remember telling him something along the lines of, he was the only one who had been deceived because he is all of those things, still is, but he decided to give in to his dark side and throw all that away. Paris knows, as well as I do, that when he decided to kill Ella that night, he killed my Paris too. He made a choice to give in to what he calls his tentacles. They have not let him go. He's just learned to integrate them into, hide them underneath, what most of you see. A charming, educated, well-mannered, super intelligent, seemingly well-adjusted young man. I see all that too, but maybe because I'm his mother, maybe because I love him no matter what, maybe because he still likes to hurt me, he allows me to see the tentacles too. I can see them now. Trust me, they're still there. He can't help them any more than he can help breathing. After that conversation with the new other Paris, I began to believe there was something wrong, something missing in my son. That was April of 2007, right after what would have been Ella's 5th birthday. I'd like to thank Dr. B for pointing out to the court that, in his opinion, psychopathy testing is only done to suit the purposes of whoever is paying the bill for the testing, because it was a defense-paid expert who first told me my son is a psychopath. As the court knows, Paris was remanded to the custody of what is now the Texas Juvenile Justice Department in August of 2007. I settled in San Antonio, Texas. Right after I settled in, I received a phone call from Dr. R.C., who had been retained by the defense to address the issue of Paris's competency. He called, he said, because he felt a moral obligation to inform me of his opinion about my child. He told me he could not tell me what he was about to tell me before Paris's sentencing because he worked for Paris, not me. After he spoke his piece, I knew he couldn't have told me what he did before Paris was sentenced because it would have not been good for my son at all. What Dr. C told me that day, while I sat on my back porch hoping to start another life, took away the last chance I had at any kind of normal life after the tragedy that instigated this call. It took that chance away forever. Because what Dr. C told me was, while too young to formally diagnose, and although he had done no formal testing to verify his belief, it was his professional opinion, which Paris's lawyer had assured me was unimpeachable months before, that my son was a psychopath, that he had no conscience, that he was dangerous, and that the authorities in Texas did not have the skills necessary to cope with a child like him. He told me Paris would run circles around most of them, I didn't believe it. I asked him what he meant. He said, "Let me explain it to you this way. I hope I did nothing to make your child mad at me during the interviews because he is the type of kid who will remember the grudge for 25 years, hunt down my grandchildren, and think nothing of taking it out on them if I made him angry enough." I asked him what I was supposed to do. He told me the same thing every professional I've consulted with since has said. In a nutshell, get as far away from him as possible. He hates you. He loves you. It won't end well. I thanked him, hung up the phone, felt the exact same as I did the night I found out Ella was dead. Devastated. Dr. C had just told me essentially that my Paris was dead too. I still didn't believe him though. I couldn't. It took 2 more years of interacting with Paris and the caseworkers and doctors he was running circles around to finally make me lawyer up and get my own doctor in to perform the testing the state never bothered to do in the 2 years Paris had been in their custody. In those 2 years, my son never shed one tear for what he did to Ella, grew angry with me every time I did, and liked to tell me details about what he did to her that night, what he was thinking, how he felt, details that still keep me awake at night, details no mother should ever have to hear. It was my choice to sit there, my choice to endure whatever hell I have to live with because I hoped that if I showed my son he could not make me stop loving him, could not drive me away, that it would help him find his humanity, his remorse, show him he was loved enough to be human, dark side and all. Instead, he almost robbed me of my sanity and grew worse. I will say it again. I did not have my son tested to exact revenge on him or label him a monster. I despise that word. He is my baby, not a monster. I did everything I could to find out the truth about what was wrong with my son, no matter how bad that truth hurt, with the hope of finding a way to save him. Period. I won't lie and say I've never been angry with Paris. I was. My anger almost killed me, but I did not take it out on Paris in the form of revenge. I took it out on myself and everyone else around me. When I felt I could not stop myself from wanting to lash out at my child, I told him I needed a break and walked away. What some call inconsistent behavior, I call trying to keep myself sane. Did you know that trained professionals suffer burnout after 4.5 years of working with a psychopath? Try being the mother of one who murdered your child. Then try sitting across from him for 5.5 years staring at the hands you held for 13 in love, and also killed your daughter, and not ever feel anger at the fact he could care less about you, her, or what he did to all of us. Of course I felt anger. At the end of the day, my anger is not what drove my decision to have Paris tested. What drove my decision was love, love that needed to know the truth. I contacted Dr. C, asked him for the names of the 3 best juvenile forensic psychiatric assessors in the state of Texas, and did my research. Of the 3, I chose Dr. M.F. I spoke briefly with Dr. F before the testing, told him essentially the same thing I just laid out here, provided him access to Paris's master file, and consulted with the Juvenile Authorities Legal Department who approved the testing. To keep a long story short, because we all know Dr. F performed his testing and what testing he performed, I made sure the preliminary results were included in Paris's master file and brought to the attention of every person who has worked with Paris since the tests were performed. But Paris did not complete the testing because when the test results came back suggesting a moderate risk for psychopathy, but also suggesting that Paris was lying about the sexual components of his crime, which would increase his test scores, meaning they were more likely to indicate he is a psychopath and sexual deviant, he lawyered up. My belief is he was worried further probing into the sexually deviant part of his mind would hurt him in the legal arena, so he stopped cooperating on the grounds I was only trying to hurt him. No test results could have been used to increase Paris's sentence that has already been handed down. The results were intended to increase awareness about the inner working of my child's mind, to aid in his assessment and treatment. That's it. Still not wanting to believe either Dr. C's hunch based on a very respectable career or Dr. F's preliminary test results, I sent the test results to 3